Spider-Man, the genius scientist! That'll be the day!
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
Prepare to get an eye full of dirt, Jonah. Anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another really exciting Spider-Man PS4 related video. Once again, going into another list relating to the game, because previously we did in fact do the top 5 best and worst suits and suit powers within the entire game, as well as ranking the entirety of all the gadgets that you can use within Marvel's Spider-Man, from the gadget that is really good to the best gadget in the entire game. However, we are going to do the same thing with the suit mods, except this time it is in fact going to be ranked from worst to best, because there are in fact some pretty bad suit mods within this list, and the final suit mod is indeed going to be the best mod throughout the entire game. So let's start into it with the worst suit mod in the entire game, is of course going to the proximity sensor. Now, in case you didn't know, there are indeed a total amount of 23 suit mods within Marvel's Spider-Man, and each of these mods are supposed to help Spider-Man in combat in some way, either making him a bit stronger when taking out bad guys, gaining more experience after defeating a bunch of guys, or making him a bit more stealthy in certain areas. But this very first suit mod on the list is indeed the worst one out of the entirety, because its main purpose is to find the secret landmark locations scattered throughout New York, which in turn help you gain the ESU suit for Spider-Man to wear, which doesn't even come with a suit power, and basically is just a waste of a slot for a suit mod. Now, it is indeed a very helpful item to have if you are not able to find the secret landmarks located throughout the New York City in the game, and you can only find them by looking at the mini-map instead of the main map, so it is a bit more challenging for you to find them. But I don't understand why this is a suit mod and not just a normal perk that you get after beating the game. I do think it is an absolute waste of a slot for the suit mod list, where there are a bunch of other good ones that you can use during combat, and it is just a waste of a space when you can use another suit mod to help you get a bit more of an edge during fighting enemies or sneak around quicker. But still, it is very helpful to find the landmark tokens. After that, it is not very helpful at all, which is why the proximity sensor is indeed the very worst suit mod in the entire game. And if you couldn't tell where this list is going, we are indeed going to start off with the proximity sensor as the very worst suit mod in the entire game, so we are now going to slowly start building up to the best suit mod in the entire game, with moving on to the second one on the list, which indeed goes to Silent Step, which in fact makes enemies take longer to detect you during stealth sections. So it's pretty obvious to tell why Silent Step is so low on the list, and mainly because it's relating to stealth, which isn't that big of a factor within Marvel's Spider-Man, and how we would only use stealth in some sections of the game's story, or in certain demon warehouses or enemy bases, and it would only be for the first wave of each of those bases, and then immediately go back into combat. So mainly this suit mod would only last for a short amount of time, and even then, Spider-Man is a very fast character within the game. You can easily web strike an enemy, or perch takedown them, or go sneak up behind them, or use gadgets on them during stealth, and you would have the same outcome even if you did not have this suit mod at all, which is why I think it is again a waste of a slot. It is very helpful during stealth sections, but since stealth is not that big of a factor within the game, it is a bit of a useless perk to have for the entirety of Spider-Man PS4. And moving on with number 3 on the list goes to the life support suit mod, which automatically consumes a focus bar to heal you when you are low on health, and this is pretty much self-explanatory. All it does is take out the factor of you pressing a button. If you are indeed getting low on health during a boss fight or surrounded by a bunch of enemies, instead of having to manually heal yourself by pressing down on the D-pad with a focus bar in stock, you would automatically have the game do it for you when this suit mod is equipped in your sections of suit mods that you have tailored to your specific playset. And again, just like Silent Step, it is absolutely worthless. You can just press one button yourself and then heal Spider-Man very quickly. Having the game do it for you is not only a waste of a certain suit mod, but it's also a crutch, because it takes away the skill factor when you are indeed fighting a bunch of enemies surrounding you at the same time, either using your webs or different aerial mechanics to get out of the way quickly, and that way you can actually hone your skills during combat, or even swinging during the third act of the game when all the enemies are shooting at you when you're swinging throughout the city. So mainly, not only is this a bad suit mod, it also hinders your playability as Spider-Man and actually takes the skill away from trying to get better at the game. And moving on to number 4 on the list with similar critiques is relating to the Reactive Lenses suit mod, where it in fact reduces the effect of flashbangs and stun grenades. And all this does is that when you are indeed affected by a stun grenade or a flashbang, the world will get all dizzy for a second, and then you will indeed go back into fighting with normal visual capabilities. And mainly all it does is take a couple seconds off of the main time on how it usually would without this suit mod equipped, and it is a bit useless. The flashbang effect isn't that impactful. If it was, it should last longer during combat, and mainly it is only another handicap for you to use if you are indeed not able to fully cope when the flashbangs go off, so that way you feel a bit dizzy, and that way you can go back into fighting enemies very frequently and very ferociously. But once again, that takes the whole skill factor out of the game, when you should be able to just take out the guys yourself without needing a perk to help you and get used to their movesets and different weapons that they use on Spider-Man, so that way they can take them out quicker, and you as Spider-Man can take them out even faster using all the powers and gadgets that you have equipped at your disposal. So once again, not only is this a bad suit mod, it is just a bad perk in general, because that way you lose skill as a player and actually rely on the game itself to fight for you, which again makes this a very bad pick for all the suit mods that are in the game. And moving on to number 5 on the list with similar critiques that I had with Reactive Lenses and life support is indeed the Longrange Scanner, which increases the range of the AR scanner to show items and enemies farther away. Now this ability isn't bad by any means, and it does actually help you when you are trying to find specific enemies throughout a certain camp or warehouse that you're fighting in, so that way you can take out a bunch of guys and plan out your strategy in a good manner. But again, it is indeed a suit mod that takes up an entire slot for you to use with the other mods that are at your disposal, when really this should just be a normal upgrade that you get throughout the game, or even when you are leveling up with experience. Just like the swing speed increases automatically, this should just be a certain item or perk that you can get when automatically leveling up throughout the game. I do understand why it is a suit mod, but still, I do think it would be better if it was just a normal upgrade within one of the 3 skill trees, or just get it while you normally level up throughout the main game. But still, I do understand the use of this suit mod. I wouldn't use it myself because of how there are tons of other ones that you can use more frequently, but if you do want to find a huge group of bad guys for you to take out in a proper manner, this will indeed help you find more enemies at a safer distance, which is indeed very helpful, but still, I would not use this personally. And speaking of a scanner, we are now moving on to number 6 on the list with Bioscanner, which allows you to have scanned enemies remain highlighted until the combat begins. Now, the reason why this suit mod is better than Long Range Scanner is because Bioscanner has the enemy's red aura remain intact even when you are crazily exploring the map or just trying to find a better approach to take out all the enemies in the certain combat area that you are indeed exploring, and especially when you are trying to use all sorts of gadgets or stealth maneuvers on these enemies in a stealthy way, it will indeed help. But again, stealth isn't that big of a factor within Spider-Man PS4. You only use it in brief moments during the game, and only during the first wave of each certain base that you explore. So this one, it does help when starting off certain bases that you are fighting in, or even during certain parts of the story if you do in fact want to do everything in a stealthy way and not lose track of enemies. But it is not that helpful during all the other suit mods that you can indeed equip other than this one. But still, if you do like having a stealthy approach more than others do, this one is actually very handy. So now we're starting to move on to the more combat oriented suit mods within the game, and even though I really dislike this one, it still is very helpful in certain combat scenarios, even though I personally never use it. I am of course talking about Biomesh, which absorbs some incoming damage without resetting the combo counter. And really all this suit mod does is make sure that your combo counter continuously keeps flowing even if you do get hit. And the reason why this is important is because the bigger combo that you have, the faster you will gain focus, and the more focus you have, the faster you can take out enemies, either with finishers, cool healing abilities, that way Spider-Man can regain more health, or if you just want to save it until you can blast off a huge awesome suit power to regain tons of focus bars, you can unleash a huge amount of finishers every chance you can get with all the focus bars that you can receive with the higher combo counter that you have, which is why Biomesh is actually pretty handy if you want to keep a continuous combo flowing, even if you do get damaged by certain enemies. But me personally, I'm not trying to brag here, but I do indeed not get hit a lot when I am doing certain combat scenarios, and I just use a bunch of gadgets to give me the upper edge when fighting a bunch of enemies. So this, even though it is helpful to keep your combo going, it is a bit irrelevant for me and other skilled Spider-Man players when fighting a bunch of bad guys who do not need to worry about getting hit every chance they get. And moving on to another suit mod which relates to Spidey being able to defend himself in a more efficient way actually relates to the Ferromagnetic Harness, which indeed reduces the duration of the electrocuted status effect inflicted by stun batons and electric weapons. So I don't know about you guys, but those baton wielding guys were a real pain when I first encountered them in the game, and I had a real problem trying to dodge over them any chance I could when starting off the game. But now, since we all are basically pros at playing the game and fighting a bunch of enemies, we do not have to worry about them as much because we just learn to dodge either over them or underneath them and use either a bunch of gadgets at your disposal or just environmental attacks to take them out in a quicker way. So if you do manage to actually get beaten up by these guys a lot, this suit mod is very helpful, so that way you can take less damage from their electric batons and just get out of there quicker and take them out in a more efficient and stylish way. And even though I find this suit mod to be a bit weird, since it indeed relates to only one specific enemy throughout the entire game, I still find it very helpful when you are indeed trying to take out that one type of foe. However, there is indeed another suit mod out there that relates to one specific enemy type, and that is of course all the enemies with rocket launchers with blast plates, which reduces incoming blast and rocket damage from enemies wielding RPGs. Now once again, just like the Ferromagnetic Harness, I do find it weird that this one suit mod relates to one specific enemy type in the game, but it is indeed useful if you are getting blasted a bunch with those pesky rocket launchers that do indeed heat-seek Spider-Man with those crazy rockets that they all are shooting at you all at the same time. If you are surrounded by a bunch of enemies with rocket launchers or just a lot of enemies with guns, that will indeed slow you down with a lot of dodges and will eventually hit you with one giant rocket blast. So if you do manage to get hit a lot with rocket launchers, this suit mod is very handy when you are trying to defend yourself in a very proper way, and will actually give you a bit of an edge when you do get blasted with rockets and not get as much damage, so that way you can go to the enemy with the rockets and then hit them frequently and then take them out with as much style as you would like to. So even though I don't like using these two specific suit mods, I do see why they would appeal to some people who might have trouble when fighting those types of enemies, and they are really helpful if there are a lot of those specific enemies in a certain combat area. Now moving on to another suit mod, which is actually starting to head towards the section of the better suit mods within the game, relates to First Aid, which increases the amount you are healed from using focus. And this suit mod is very self-explanatory and actually very handy in certain combat scenarios where if you are indeed surrounded by a bunch of guys that are dealing tons of damage on Spider-Man and you need to get some healing backup so that way you don't die, you can equip this suit mod to actually get a huge boost of health by using a little bit of your focus bar instead of an entire full bar, and that way you can use another finisher very quickly instead of having to use it all just to heal Spider-Man. And at first I didn't think I was going to be using this suit mod too much, but when I actually started to use it when trying to gather footage for this video, I did find it to be extremely helpful during a lot of combat scenarios relating to the Sable agents and even some of the prisoners that you fight in those bases, where they surround you a bunch, shoot a bunch of weapons at you, and actually damage Spider-Man quite a lot. So if you do want to get a lot more health back, this suit mod is actually very handy for you to use. As for another suit mod that relates to the fighting in the game, is something that you get really early on and is easily a fantastic suit mod within the entire game, is of course the Combat Analyzer suit mod, where you can have Spider-Man increase his amount of XP that he gains after defeating enemies. It's also very handy that you get this very early on in the game, so that way you can have Spider-Man swing at a faster rate every time he levels up, as well as get every single upgrade that you can possibly gain in all the skill trees that you are able to choose from, which makes it very handy when you are indeed selecting from a plethora of upgrades from Spider-Man to choose from, especially with this suit mod at your disposal, so that way you can level up at a extremely fast-paced manner and get the drop on every single enemy that you can fight afterwards. As for another suit mod that relates to getting damage during combat and allows you to get the drop on enemies in a better way, is of course referring to the Metabolic Converter, which gives you a chance to generate gadget refills when taking damage, and this is rarely self-explanatory. When you get hit, you do have a 50-50 chance of either just getting damaged or actually gaining another gadget that you may have lost during combat or that needs to be refilled, like the impact web, web bomb, trip mine, or more. And when you are indeed getting hit by a lot of enemies very frequently, this is something very handy to use on different enemies with different weapons to take on Spider-Man with, or just laying a huge smackdown on you with a huge group of enemies at their side. So if you do have this suit mod and you're just getting wailed on, it would be handy to use it if you are trying to get the drop on them with gadgets and just take them out instantly with all the gadgets that you have in store. As for a suit mod that mainly relates to skill, is actually going over the discharged power cells, which gains the perfect dodge, temporarily increasing damage for Spider-Man to attack his foes with. So the thing I like about this suit mod is that it actually encourages the player to pull off perfect dodges, not only for the sake of their own playstyle, and that way they can actually get a more sense of success when taking on every enemy with a perfect dodge, but if you actually manage to pull one off, you will indeed be rewarded with more damage tailored to each enemy that you attack after pulling off a perfect dodge perfectly. And I think this one is indeed very helpful when you are indeed surrounded by a bunch of guys that you want to take out quickly, but you may not be able to use gadgets or just not a lot of environmental objects, so a good way out is to pull off a perfect dodge, get a bit of an increase during combat with more damage, then beat up every guy that you see in sight, and that way you'll be able to take them out much faster in a better way. But if you happen to be surrounded too much by a bunch of bad guys, this next suit mod will come in very handy relating to gel padding, which reduces incoming melee damage, and this is honestly one of my go-to suit mods because of how I would love it to take less damage from any guy that goes and lays his hands on Spider-Man, and this one is easily one of the best suit mods in the game. It's not number one, but is still really handy. Getting hit is not fun, so to make it even more fun for you, you can take less damage from guys with this suit mod equipped in your 3 slots, and this is one that I always choose in my 3 slots in the game. Even though this isn't the best one in the game, I personally like to use it because the other ones are a bit too OP for my taste, so I find this one to be a good balance. That way, if I do get hit, I can take a bit less damage from their hits, and that way I can actually get out of there quicker instead of almost dying from every attack that they lay on Spider-Man. But this only relates to melee damage, not bullet damage or rocket damage, mainly just getting hit by bad guys with their main fists, which is why I think it's a good balancing point. That way, if I do get hit by enemies with their fists, I won't take as much damage, but if I do get hit with rockets or bullets, I will indeed take a lot of damage. So I do find this to be a good middle point suit mod, but I know it's not the best one, so let's move on. So if gel padding wasn't enough for you, this next suit mod will actually allow you to inflict damage on an enemy that just inflicted damage on you, and of course what I'm talking about is the charged outer mesh suit mod, where plasma discharging mesh electrifies suit surface, stunning enemies who touch it, and it needs to be recharged after activation. So this suit mod is pretty much an upgrade of the gel padding suit mod, where you will not be able to take less damage from an enemy hitting you, but you will be able to send an electric current through your costume and onto the enemy, damaging them seamlessly while damaging others if they are nearby, which makes no sense at all, but it still is very fun to pull off if you are indeed surrounded by a bunch of goons, and that way you just need something to clear the space where you can take on more enemies, so this suit mod will actually come in real handy at your heart's desire. So if those last 2 suit mods weren't any indication as to where this list is going, this next one is going to be pretty self-explanatory because of how helpful it is during combat scenarios, and is personally one of my go-to suit mods that I use every chance I get because of how handy it is. And of course I'm talking about the Ballistic Insert suit mod, which of course reduces incoming bullet damage, and obviously what else is there to say? You get shot at, and this suit mod will allow you to take less damage from bullets that are shooting at Spider-Man, and for me, this is one of the best suit mods in the game, not the best, but one of the best, and personally one of my go-to picks because I don't worry too much about enemies punching me because I can just jump out of the way or use gadgets, but I do worry a lot about enemies shooting me with guns, taking away my health, and actually taking away my combo counter when I'm in a flow of a awesome combo. But with this one equipped, I will not take a whole lot of damage from bullets, and instead can just keep going and keep on fighting every enemy that I see in sight, which is extremely handy and will not break the flow of combat at all, especially if this one will take less damage away from Spider-Man, which makes it all the better when taking on a bunch of guys with rifles, guns, and etc. And continuing on with this list, we are now going on to the very first suit mod that you get actually when beginning the game, is of course relating to Battletech, where gadget attacks generate more focus, and this is actually very handy because it allows you to try and get more acquainted with the gadget system within Spider-Man PS4, try and use every gadget at your disposal, and as a reward, you will be able to gain more focus, being able to heal yourself in a faster way, or just manage to pull off a bunch of awesome finishers when surrounded by a bunch of bad guys. And honestly, this is one of the best suit mods in the game. I know I say that a lot, but it is true, since now we are getting closer to the end of the list. This is an actual very useful suit mod that I actually use quite frequently, especially when I first played the game. I actually used this one quite a lot and managed to get me more experience with using the web shooters, all the other gadgets in the game, and just be more frequent with the amount of times I use webs in combat. As for one of the crazier suit mods that you have within the game relates to the Stormbolt Discharger, where it can build up an electrical charge by performing air attacks and release that charge by attacking enemies on the ground. So if you love that one Harry Osborn research station that took place at nighttime and had all the lightning striking New York City everywhere you went, this pretty much recreates that awesome research station, and not only that, but also gives you a huge bonus during combat when taking out enemies in aerial ways, that way shooting out a huge blast of electricity any chance you get, either electrocuting one person or a bunch of enemies all at once. And even though this again makes no sense at all, it still is very, very powerful and actually encourages you to do more aerial combos and techniques to stay in the air and take on enemies to build this suit mod up and deal more damage, which is very handy and allows you to be more acquainted with the aerial maneuvers that Spider-Man can use when fighting foes. And even though that suit mod does sound extremely powerful, this next one is indeed much stronger than it because of how frequent you can use it with Web Striker, where web attacks generate more focus in a very self-explanatory manner, either using web shooters, impact webbing, web bombs, anything like that. If you keep using gadgets, you will indeed gain more focus, and once again, with more focus comes more finishers, more healing, and just more of an awesome time when fighting bad guys. And considering how frequently I personally use the webbing, this is one of my go-to suit mods, again, out of the entire list. Not the best, but still very, very handy in a lot of combat scenarios when using web shooters, impact webbing, or anything like that. This will indeed come in very handy, especially if you are surrounded by a bunch of heavy guys or a lot of armor guys. Getting a bunch of finishers in on them with this suit mod equipped is the best thing to do. And funny enough, another suit mod that primarily relates to focus is the Kinetic power cells, which increases the rate on which focus generates. So if you weren't already getting a lot of focus with doing a bunch of aerial maneuvers, web attacks, and more, this one will flat out allow you to gain more focus regardless of what you do, either attacking enemies on the ground, using environmental objects, using a bunch of different takedown methods, or anything that you can think of. This will just simply gain you more focus while you are fighting, plain and simple. And once again, with more focus comes more finishers, more healing, and just more of a fast-paced combat style with more fun to be had with a full focus bar, which makes the combat even more entertaining when taking on a bunch of bad guys at the same time. And with all those out of the way, we now move on to the top 3 suit mods within the entire game, with the first one actually being one that a lot of people use more than I thought they would, is with threat sensors, which actually slows down time if you manage to acquire a perfect dodge, which in hindsight is very, very handy, especially if you are fighting a boss. This actually does in fact relate to bosses, normal enemies, or anything that you can think of. When actually fighting the enemy with this suit mod equipped, you feel like a total beast. Being able to get the drop on enemies with time being slowed down to look even cooler than you could think of is actually very, very exciting. And if you do want to get more of a breathing room when fighting enemies, this suit mod is the go-to suit mod to equip, since you will indeed have a lot of time to recuperate from a bunch of enemies trying to kill Spidey. And even though I find this suit mod to be a bit too OP, I still understand why a lot of people would want to use it. So as we draw closer to the end of this list, everyone, we are now moving on to the second best suit mod in the entire game, and my personal favorite suit mod in the entirety of Spider-Man PS4, obviously relating to the Scavenger suit mod, where you can gain more gadgets after pulling off finishers, which is extremely handy when taking on a bunch of guys, because if you use a gadget, you gain more focus. When you gain more focus, you can pull off a finisher, and with this suit mod equipped, if you do pull off a finisher, you can indeed gain a gadget back, having the cycle repeat itself, take on enemies in a much stylish way, have the gadgets always be at your disposal, and just pull off an awesome amount of combos with all the gadgets you have while never running out of any, because of how you will always be gaining focus when doing combat, which makes this one of the best suit mods in the game, and easily my second favorite suit mod in the entire game, but my personal favorite of the entirety of Spider-Man PS4. And finally, to end this list, we now have the very best suit mod within the entire game is of course going to the full charge capacitors, where it can increase damage when your health is above 100. And honestly, this is pretty darn self-explanatory, and also if you are very skilled at the game, this is very, very OP. You will basically not take any damage if you are really good at the game's combat regardless. So if you just want to do combat really quickly and not worry about it to be a challenge, have this suit mod equipped and instantly take out bad guys within the matter of a few punches and instantly get the fight over with with in the matter of seconds, which is absolutely insane and is easily the best suit mod in the entirety of Spider-Man PS4, making fights next to none and just instantly take out foes any chance you get. It is a bit too OP for my taste, but in terms of how good the suit mod is, this one is pretty darn effective. And with all that out of the way, everyone, that is the list of suit mods ranked from worst to best for the entirety of Marvel's Spider-Man. Please let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What is your personal favorite suit mod in the entire game, and what is your personal least favorite suit mod that Spider-Man PS4 has to offer? Did you agree with my list? What do you guys think about the suit mods in the game in general? Do you think that some were a waste, or do you think that some were pretty good, and that you think that they should add a lot more or a lot less in the inevitable sequel? Overall, I only use a total of 5 suit mods in the entire game, and I do not like how there are some relating to stealth because it's not that big of a factor in the entire game, but still, I do like the inclusion of suit mods within Spider-Man PS4, and I'm really looking forward to what other types of suit mods we could see if Insomniac makes a sequel, which I'm pretty sure they will. But anyways, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Peace out.
Sources tell me that he's running around town using unsanctioned experimental gadgets like trip mines, spider drones, and something called a web bomb. Where does he even get the stuff?
Mr. Parker, Dr. Connors here.
Oh, Dr. Connors. How are you?